Hello and welcome to Roundtable. Having blocked billions in COVID economic relief to Hungary, the European Union is looking to cut billions more to punish Victor Orban as he continues to break ranks with the bloc's liberal values and tough sanctions over Russia's attack on Ukraine. Apparently emboldened by his landslide electoral victory, Prime Minister Orban says he's prepared to pay for gas with rubles and won't reverse opposition to the EU's liberal values. So can all other European Union nations agree to penalise Orban? Does Orban even care? Very good to have your company. I'm David Foster. Victor Orban's election victory has not been met warmly by European leaders. He has continued to tighten his control over the media, NGOs, and restricted freedoms for migrants. Just 2 days after his re-election, the executive arm of the European Union started disciplinary action against Hungary and Orbán that could freeze EU funds to the country.
We've sent a letter to Hungary with questions. They have answered, and we've carefully assessed the result of these questions. And our conclusion is we have to move on the next step. And therefore, the Commissioner Hahn has today spoken to the Hungarian authorities and informed them that we will now send the letter of formal notification to start the conditionality mechanism.
This is the first time in the European Union's history that it's using this new tool to protect the EU's financial interests against breaches of the rule of law taking place inside a member state. How long will it take Brussels to partially or to fully suspend EU funds to Hungary? And will this take the shine off Orban's victory? Very pleased to welcome in the studio Denis McShane, former UK Minister for Europe. We go to Budapest, Hungary, of course, and András László, political advisor to the ruling Fidesz party. And in Warsaw, Poland, Wojciech Cebulski, editor-in-chief of Visegrad Insight. We are going to, in this programme, play 3 separate clips of things that Orban has said. We'll get to those in just a moment, and I'd like your reactions to what he puts out there when we get to that point. But Denis, first of all, is the European Union upset with him because he appears to be siding, well, if not siding, then certainly not condemning Russia and taking advantage of the fact that he's getting cheap gas from there? Or is it something that goes back a long way?
It's both, isn't it? Basically, European Union is based on rules. Here in England, we didn't like the rules, so we left. In Hungary, Mr. Orban doesn't like the rules. He breaks the rules. He wants to stay because he gets an awful lot of money and he gets access for all the goods he makes there freely. His citizens can travel and work freely. So he wants to have his cake and eat it.
Well, set it up for our viewers. Which rules in particular is he breaking, has he broken, that are upsetting?
Well, the 2 big ones are full media freedom, full academic freedom. He drove out of Hungary a university set up by the Jewish-American ex-Hungarian philanthropist George Soros, widely seen in America as an act against a Jewish and prominent person. And then there are other rules on judicial independence, which have been thoroughly examined by all sorts of independent committees. And the decision is he just doesn't want to obey.
He's putting
rules.
his own judges in there. He's strengthening the courts in his favour.
He's just rigging the constitution and the rules so he can stay. But he can't stay in power forever because he's not eternal. There's no gift of eternal life yet discovered on the river Danube.
He has been in there for some time now. András László, I know you've been celebrating. You are a big supporter of Victor Orban. Does he have any concern about what the European Union could do to your country financially, or does he not care?
I think Hungary is concerned for the whole of Europe. The current war going on and the economic situation in Europe is not looking very good. There have been a couple of good years, and now I think every government has their spreadsheets open and doing recalculations on what to expect and how to move forward. I don't agree with the assessment that we're breaking laws of the European Union. There are ways to sanction member states with infringement procedures. These happen all the time, and then governments come to an agreement with European institutions. Hungary wants to keep growing. We see the risk of war in the neighborhood. Hungary is a direct neighbor of Ukraine. We would like this war to stop as soon as possible. And we'd like to, be back on the path road.
Okay, let's talk about a couple of things with regard to the conflict in Europe at the moment. Hungary's been criticized for not taking its share of refugees in the same manner that Poland, its former close ally, has been doing. It's been criticized also for buying cheap gas from Russia. If not siding with Putin, it's certainly hedging its bets.
I don't know where you're getting your sources of information from, because Hungary has taken in every single refugee who was entering from Ukraine fleeing the war. We have done this from day one. We've clearly communicated this. The government has provided money for charity organizations helping people fleeing from the war. And we've set up major volunteering systems as well. And we're sending humanitarian aid not only to help those who have fled the war in Ukraine, we're also sending humanitarian aid inside Ukraine to help people who are either displaced internally there.
Okay, well, I have read criticism, but you've had the chance to put that right from your point of view. I want to ask you about gas. The TASS, Russian news agency, saying very recently, February of this year, that they've signed a deal, Russia and Hungary, up to 2036 for very, very cheap gas to come from Russia into Hungary, 1/5 of the European market price, lasting till 2036, another 14 years. There's no way that Hungary wants to upset Russia right now with those economic benefits, surely.
Well, there has been no EU sanctions on Russian gas and oil imports yet. There have been several sanctions packages already passed. Hungary has supported each of those sanctions. We have not vetoed any of these. But it's a reality in Europe that in 2021, about 40% of the gas used in Europe came from Russia. This 40% is not spread evenly among member countries. Hungary is highly dependent on Russian gas and oil imports, and thus the economy cannot function without it. And Hungarian households cannot be heated without Russian gas.
With that in mind, with what you've said about the economic price that Europe has to pay and the fact that Ukraine has got a pretty good deal when it comes to paying for its gas, do you think Orban is prepared to support Putin come what may?
I don't see how this is supporting Putin. It's a trade deal for an essential good on the Hungarian market and on the European market. No European decision has been taken to stop or limit this kind of energy exports from Russia. This is not about supporting Putin. This is about assuring that your economy can keep going. If you shut off Russian gas today in Hungary and other European countries, the economy will simply stop.
Okay, Andras, thank you very much for now. Wojciech, I'm going to come to you in just a moment. Right now, we're going to play a little clip of what Victor Orban had to say about sanctions.
There is an economic crisis in Europe which has several causes. These add up. The most important reason is the sanctions, the system of sanctions we imposed on Russia. We will pay the price for it. We have to get prepared to tackle this European economic crisis.
Wojciech, is he right? Is he being pragmatic about this? And he understands perhaps where Europe needs to position itself, because at the moment, Russian gas is very important. You can't cut it off, oil and gas, and you can't live without Russia to some extent, and therefore the sanctions are perhaps backfiring on Russia to some extent.
Well, it very much depends on your strategic vision or where you put your strategic goals. From the point of view of domestic politics, it's obvious that Viktor Orban is maximizing his gains and his strategy ambitions on keeping control of the government in his own country, and he's successful. On the matter of energy security, European sovereignty, or European power in the world, he sees and he does not believe the European Union is any power, is delivering anything else than some economic gains. And he actually plays a game of Europe as if Europe was doomed to fail in short to medium time. And I think this is exactly which is making him a counterproductive partner in the European Union.
Is he going to bring suffering upon Hungary by refusing to bend to EU rules and therefore losing the money that would come Hungary's way? Or is he, as Andras says, actually playing the right game because he thinks Europe is suffering because of the sanctions it's imposed and Hungary is actually taking the correct path?
Europe is not suffering because of the sanctions. Europe is suffering because of increased decisions about to increase dependency on Russia. All the decisions that were aiming at decreasing dependency from Russia, or all the ambitions to make a European energy market a common market instead of one, partitioned markets between different national governments. These were the efforts to build up European interests, and with those in place, we would have better situation, also economically, not to mention strategically and in terms of security. Now the sanctions are the only thing we can have in order to contain Russia, to limit Russia's ability to build up military power and to threaten not only Ukraine, but the rest of Europe.
But
So-
not only sanctioning Russia, whether you consider that to be right or wrong, but also sanctioning another member of the European Union.
Oh, you mean sanctions against Hungary?
Well, I mean both, actually, in this context. We've talked about the sanctions against Russia, but by withholding this money, the European Union is sanctioning one of its own.
Well, but the European Union is Hungary. Hungary is European Union. Hungary accepted the proposed mechanism on the rule of law. And because this mechanism has been also, on the request of Hungary, verified by European Court of Justice, that Hungary also belongs to and shapes its policies, it eventually accepts sanctions that are a natural consequence of having the most number of cases in the European Union, which are reported by the OLAF, anti-fraud, anti-corruption agency.
Okay, Dennis, I want to bring you in. Thanks for being patient. Comments on what you've heard so far, but also I would like to go into the idea of whether Hungary sees itself as a genuine reformer of the European Union or totally outside that club.
Oh, it's completely outside. I mean, nobody takes any interest anywhere in Europe in Orban's utterings, his crawling to Putin, his support for Russia in so many areas. One is, three things have happened just very recently. Since Mr. Orban's handsome victory, which we discussed some time ago, it was very clear to me that the opposition was just so weak and divided that Mr. Orban would win. Plus, he gave every pensioner in Hungary an extra month's pension. And I'm a pensioner. I think I'd vote even for Boris Johnson if he whacked me another 13 months pension. So, three things have happened. Number one, Putin's invaded. Not quickly and suddenly as he did in previous, but a full-scale World War II type, tanks, military, everything invasion. Brutal killings. And he's, of course, Mr. Orban says, oh, I don't like war, I don't like that. He's not saying more than that. It's not so much he's buying gas with rubles, those things that nobody else in Europe is doing. He is not showing any solidarity. He's a quisling. He's not standing with the rest of democratic Europe. Big breach with Warsaw. The peace government, the Law and Justice Party, their leader Kaczynski, made pretty clear that he's had it with Putin.
Well,
not with Putin, with Orban.
With Orban, because there was a very close relationship
There was.
between
They
Warsaw
were the
and
naughty
Budapest.
boys. They were a double act who would support each other in vetoing any action by Brussels against the other. But the most important, two other things, very briefly. Number one, Mrs. Merkel's disappeared, and her record now looks terrible. She was Orban's number one protector in the European Conservative parties. They have disintegrated all over Europe. Biggest one, though, and for that we have to wait, I'm afraid, David, for about 10 more days. Does President Macron win or not? Orban's biggest political ally in Europe is Marine Le Pen. They're always in a love fest together. If Mr. Macron wins, as I think he will, I think he's had it up to here too with Victor Orban.
Okay, can we bring Andras back in on this point? Two things that Dennis mentions there. One is the Warsaw-Budapest axis broken irrevocably by what has happened.
I just have to come back to some of the previous points. It's like really, I cited facts at the very beginning on how much humanitarian aid we're sending and that we're helping each and every refugee fleeing from Ukraine. I really cannot understand this kind of smears going on. Hungary has been extremely solidary, both supported all the sanctions the European Union took against Russia, and we're helping all the refugees who want to flee Ukraine via Hungary.
Andras, what military help have you sent? What military help have you sent?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
What arms has Hungary sent? What military weapons to kill Russians and to defeat Putin has Hungary
We
sent?
didn't send, and it's official government policy, and it's a decision that we're not sending.
Well, that's it then. That's it. You're neutral. You're just like Spain in the Second World War. You're staying out of it. You let the Nazis and the West fight each other.
We are sending humanitarian aid to Ukraine, to Ukrainians suffering.
Okay.
You can't portray that as being pro-Putin, but it's ridiculous.
Well, let me play another clip from Victor Orban when it comes to military security, when it comes to cooperation with the European Union, and we will discuss that in just a second.
We continue to see the future of Hungary within the European Union, and we would like to play an active part in forming the future of Europe. We will also strengthen our alliance for security. We are members of NATO, and we will continue to be so.
So, Wojciech, a full supporter of NATO, a full supporter of the European Union, and Andras, will come back to you in just a second. Is that really how Orban feels?
As he often expressed his opinion, membership in the EU and NATO is enabling him to open up to the East, to trade and deal with Moscow or Beijing, which are, by NATO countries, considered revisionist powers, by EU as well, hostile to the key interest of the continent, of the West, as we're concerned about the world order, for instance. So opening doors for them as a NATO member and a EU member is considered by Viktor Orban an opportunist strategy that perhaps not deliberately he doesn't deliberately want to undermine NATO, but in consequence it does.
Okay, and another one in reply to what Andras had to say, he's pointing out that Hungary, in his opinion, has met its humanitarian obligations, even though, as Dennis has said, it hasn't sent weaponry, which was agreed by Andras. Where does that leave Hungary when it comes to the conflict involving Ukraine?
Hungary, during the electoral campaign, chose not to support Ukraine in terms of the military effort, which is the key effort. And Victor Orban, during the campaign, in an interview for a conservative portal Madiner, said that he considers in the strategic interest of Hungary to be a big space, an equal space between Budapest and Moscow, based on some hostilities of the past and bad experience. And he said, and I quote, "This moment in time, this space is called Ukraine," as if indicating that he doesn't care what the nation state of Ukraine would be.
But what about
the
the fact that Andras has said, and he's brought it up twice, that Hungary has been meeting its humanitarian obligations, that refugees have been warmly accepted within the country, and that financial help has been sent to Ukraine. Do you agree with that statement or not?
It's definitely having open borders for refugees, and then check what the refugees are doing once they, cross the border in Hungary. and listen to the narrative that the government is selling and what the people are thinking about Ukrainians.
Sorry, what are you saying that what are you
elections-
saying the refugees are experiencing once they get into Hungary? And I will come back to you on this, Andras. What are you saying is their experience?
I'm saying that their experience is that the society already is anti-Ukrainian. They believe Ukrainians are not to be welcome, and Ukrainians understand that. And just check the numbers on the trains from Budapest, where the Ukrainians are leaving.
Okay, you've got to have a right of reply on that, Andras, and then I'll come to you, Dennis. Not welcome.
I'm seriously asking myself the question whether this is a serious discussion. We have never had so many volunteers in Hungary helping out, volunteering, not paid, volunteering, traveling 300 kilometers or more to the Ukrainian-Hungarian border, helping refugees, and also a hotspot set up in Budapest, in the capital city, receiving thousands of Ukrainians every day, and they're being helped by volunteers, by charity organizations, and people sending money and food and baby supplies and medical and every kind of supply. This is really becoming ridiculous. We've experienced this disinformation campaign since the first days of the Ukrainian-Russian war when it broke out.
All right, you have had your opportunity to repudiate. You've done it. I've got to leave it there because I want to bring in one more soundbite from Victor Orban.
So I suggested to President Putin that he should immediately declare a ceasefire. We need an immediate ceasefire. I know it doesn't happen just like that, and I also propose that they should come to Budapest. They should come, the Ukrainian president, the French president, and the German chancellor. The earlier the better. Let them talk in Budapest. It wouldn't be a problem for us to pay in rubles. If the Russians want to be paid in ruble, we will pay them in rubles.
Is he setting himself up as the peacemaker, Viktor Orban, in this?
No, he's staying right out of it. The Turkish leader, Mr. Erdogan's tried to do that a bit and hosted a couple of meetings. Hungary just wants to turn in on itself. I'm sure they've accepted a quota of refugees, whether as generously as Poland and Germany. Let's go and check. And how the Hungarians are received in personal terms, let's go and check. I don't trust any statements from any.
Well, okay, but we're hearing from Budapest that yes, they are welcome. We're hearing from Warsaw that they're not. We can't prove it one way or the other from here, but we've got to leave that to one side.
Right. It's interesting.
What about as an international statesman?
Right.
That's what he's trying to set himself up to be or not?
Doesn't exist. Mr. Zelensky, I don't think, spoken to the Hungarian parliament, unless Andras corrects me, because he knows he's getting nothing from Hungary. Mr. Orban, like Marine Le Pen, has been for years and years Vladimir Putin's best friend in West Europe, like their other friend, Alexander Vučić, is in Serbia. Now the chips are down. The United States wants everybody to stand together. I think if President Macron is re-elected, he will be asking hard questions. And the Hungarian question will be on the agenda. Is it just better for all of us, in a very friendly way, to say to Hungary, look, go off like Britain, go off and just leave Europe. We're not going to do anything nasty.
But Dennis, nobody is going to expel a European country from the European Union. But the question, and this has to be, does Hungary want to remain a member of the European Union? Given Viktor Orban's views and given the fact that the financial penalties are about to fall quite heavily on your country.
A couple of issues here. Of course, we want to stay members of the European Union. There's no discussion about that in Hungary or in Europe. And no one ever questioned that. Second, there is no quota on refugees Hungary is meeting. There is no quota system set up for Ukrainian refugees. We want a successful Europe, a prospering Europe. We also want the same thing for Hungary. We're ready to do whatever it takes. Of course, the European Union has...
Whatever it takes. Will Hungary do what the European Union wants when it comes to reversing the changes in the courts, when it comes to opening up more media organisations? Will it abide by the rule of law, which the European Union says it hasn't been doing?
The European Parliament initiated an Article 7 procedure against Hungary in 2018. The discussions have been ongoing for 4 years now, or almost 4 years in the Council, without a single vote, without a specific measure they asked us to change. And now they're doing exactly the same thing. They're talking about withholding money based on rule of law concerns, but they haven't even sent a letter on what they want us
Well, this
to
is the point, isn't it, Wojciech? The European Union can... Andreas, sorry, we have only 1 minute left, so I'm going to just put one last question to our guest from Poland. Wojciech, this is the point, surely, isn't it? That the European Union can say what it wants, it can withhold all the money, but actually, in the end, nothing really happens, nothing changes.
Well, for the foreseeable future, nothing will change in the political system of Hungary. It's up to the Hungary, of course, to decide how they want to set up their political system. The question is whether taxpayers in the EU are okay with how their money is spent.
I appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed. And Andreas, apologies if you felt I had to cut you off on a number of occasions, but it was interesting to hear your point of view and get the counter-arguments as well. Thank you very much indeed for coming on from Hungary, from Poland. Dennis here in the studio with me, David Foster, and thank you very much indeed, all of you, wherever you happen to be, for watching this edition of Roundtable. Until next time, goodbye.